Imagine this. You're at a lively party, enjoying the music and the company. 3 weeks later, you're summoned to the police station, placed in a lineup, and then arrested for capital murder. You spend the next 48 years behind bars. This is the bone-chilling reality Glynn Simmons faced. The year was 1974. The peaceful atmosphere of a quaint town in Edmond, Oklahoma, was brutally disrupted. 2 suspects plunged a local liquor store into chaos, leaving a path of destruction. A store clerk was killed, and a customer, Belinda Brown, was also shot, but survived. Despite extensive efforts to track down the culprits, the police hit a dead end. Enter Glynn Simmons and Don Roberts, 2 African-American men who found themselves caught up in a lineup that began this horrifying story. They were arrested for the murder, and their conviction rested on one eyewitness who picked them from a lineup, Belinda Brown, the surviving customer. The gavel fell, and both men were condemned to death. Glynn Simmons, a man who should have been enjoying his freedom, instead found himself trapped within the merciless confines of a prison cell. He was isolated from the world, the years slipping by, all for a crime he did not commit. Meanwhile, Don Roberts was released on parole after 33 years, only to re-enter a world completely transformed from the one he knew. The plot thickened when those who had been instrumental in their convictions started to doubt their guilt. The victim's sister and the prosecutor who had fervently advocated for their death sentence started to believe in Simmons' innocence. Yet Glynn Simmons' plea for deliverance fell on deaf ears. He appealed to the appellate courts and the Pardon and Parole Board, only to be denied. He remained a prisoner, a casualty of a flawed justice system. Here is his story. On December 30th, 1974, a liquor store in Edmond, Oklahoma became a crime scene that would change 4 lives irreversibly. The day started like any other for the store clerk and customer, Belinda Brown, who were blissfully unaware of the terror that was about to descend. That fateful day, the store became a scene of violence and despair, as an ordinary transaction turned into a deadly encounter. The clerk, 30-year-old Carolyn Sue Rogers, lost her life. An 18-year-old Belinda Brown was left with injuries and memories that would last a lifetime. Meanwhile, the local law enforcement, stung by the audacious crime, swung into action. They cast a wide net, launching a statewide hunt for the perpetrators. The trail was cold, leads were scarce, and the pressure was mounting. The community was shaken, and the cry for justice was deafening. The hunt was on, and it seemed like only a matter of time before the law would catch up with the criminals. 4 days following the crime, the police interviewed Brown, the traumatized witness. Despite her fervent attempts, her recollection of the incident was foggy at best. She was convinced that any further attempts to remember the event would only dilute her memories. Concurrently, the police were investigating a separate murder case. On February 4th, 1975, the gruesome discovery of 2 bodies in a rural area outside Oklahoma City was made. The following day, Leonard Patterson was taken into custody, and he confessed to the murders. His brother Delbert acknowledged being present at the time of the murders, but denied any involvement. The police found out that the Patterson brothers had attended a party at Dorothy Norris's residence in Oklahoma City on January 19, 1975, 20 days after the liquor store robbery. Dorothy Norris was the aunt of Glynn Simmons, a 22-year-old who had recently relocated from Harvey, Louisiana for work. Since the Pattersons had attended the party, the police began gathering everyone else who attended the party for lineups, including Simmons. Brown was presented with 8 separate lineups. On February 8, 1975, following the lineups, the police apprehended Simmons and another attendee, 21-year-old Don Roberts. The evidence against them was thin, but the need for closure was strong. And so, based on the eyewitness testimony of the surviving customer, Belinda Brown, they were charged with capital murder. Simmons and Roberts found themselves at the center of a storm, facing accusations that would change their lives forever. 2 men, 1 crime, and a justice system ready to convict. The courtroom, where justice is supposed to prevail, became the stage for a tragic farce for Glynn Simmons and Don Roberts. As we delve into the details of the trial, we find that the case against Simmons and Roberts was devoid of concrete evidence. Instead, it was built on the shaky foundation of eyewitness testimony. The surviving customer, Belinda Brown, was the linchpin of the prosecution's case. Despite the trauma of the event and the fallibility of human memory, her testimony was treated as gospel. Brown told the jury that she had identified Simmons and Roberts in lineups on February 7th and February 8th. She also testified that she did not identify anyone else besides Simmons and Roberts. The defense argued against the reliability of this single eyewitness account, pointing out the lack of corroborating evidence. Simmons also testified that on December 30th, 1974, the day of the murder, he was in Harvey, Louisiana. He said he spent the day playing pool with friends. He stated he had never been to Oklahoma prior to January 5th, 1975, when he came to stay with his aunt. In an attempt to corroborate his alibi, the defense put up 4 witnesses who testified they saw Simmons in Harvey, Louisiana on December 30th and on December 31st. But the jury was swayed by the prosecution's narrative, a story of a heinous crime committed by 2 men, one of them being Simmons. The trial, in essence, was a battle of narratives, and in this instance, the prosecution's narrative won, despite its inherent weaknesses. The jury was convinced, and Simmons and Roberts were convicted of murder and sentenced to death. A verdict was delivered, but justice was far from served. The courtroom, which is intended to be a beacon of justice, instead became a theater of injustice. A man's life was put on the line based on an account that could have been influenced by stress, trauma, or even unconscious bias. This conviction is a stark reminder of the systemic issues that pervade our justice system. It underscores the need for reform, for a system that values evidence over narratives and truth over convenience. Despite the odds stacked against him, Simmons maintained his innocence. His conviction was not the end of his fight, but rather the beginning of a long and arduous journey towards truth and justice. Behind the cold prison walls, Glynn Simmons embarked on a relentless quest for justice. The years seemed to blend into an endless cycle of monotony and despair. Yet Simmons refused to yield to the oppressive weight of his unjust conviction. Within these unforgiving walls, Simmons became more than just a prisoner. He transformed into a tireless advocate for his own cause. He navigated the labyrinth of the legal system, seeking to appeal his case. Each attempt was akin to climbing a steep mountain, with the summit continually shrouded in fog. His pleas and appeals echoed through the cold hallways of justice, yet they fell on deaf ears, his parole denied time and again. But a flame of resilience continued to burn in the heart of Simmons. The denial of Roberts's plight, the rejection of his appeals, the indifference of the system, none of these could extinguish his indomitable spirit. His fight for justice was not merely about his freedom. It was a battle against a system that had failed him, a system that had turned a blind eye to the truth. His story served as a stark reminder of the grave consequences of a flawed justice system and the urgent need for reform. His persistence, his resilience, and his unwavering belief in his innocence continued to fuel his relentless quest for justice. And so, the fight went on. In the realm where shadows dwell, rays of hope often find a way to break through. For Simmons, this glimmer of optimism emanated from sources you wouldn't typically expect. Picture this: 2 men wrongfully convicted of a crime based solely on the testimony of one eyewitness. Years have passed since that ill-fated day. One convict, Don Roberts, paroled after 33 years, now experiences the freedom he was once denied, while Glynn Simmons remains trapped within the cold, unforgiving prison walls, ensnared in a seemingly eternal nightmare. Yet this is where our tale veers off the beaten path. An unexpected duo composed of the slain victim's sister and the very prosecutor who fiercely argued for Simmons' sentence began to question the judgment they once held with unyielding conviction. A strange twist, wouldn't you agree? In 1995, Robert Mildfelt, the trial prosecutor, wrote a letter to Simmons saying that Belinda Brown, the lone survivor from that lethal day at the local liquor store, had wrestled with the guilt of her identification. Haunted by the chilling prospect that she might condemn the wrong men, she had wanted to mull over her recognition overnight. Robert Mildfelt, the trial prosecutor who once championed justice for a fallen liquor store clerk, found himself questioning the integrity of that justice. In the letter penned in March 1995, Mildfelt also revealed that Belinda Brown had described the killer as a towering figure, over 6 feet tall and weighing more than 200 pounds, a stark contrast to Simmons' stature at the time. Interestingly, Mildfelt also went above and beyond, writing letters to the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board in favor of Simmons' release on parole, a release that has, however, been consistently denied because of Simmons' refusal to accept responsibility for the murder. The weight of such self-doubt and the pressure of such uncertainty are unfathomable, And yet, from a distant corner, hope flickered. Joseph Norwood and John Coyle, the tireless attorneys at the forefront of Simmons's fight for freedom, offered steadfast dedication and unyielding resolve to unearth the truth. They were Simmons's beacon of hope, presenting him an opportunity to be more than just a case number in an indifferent system. Their persistent updates, their allegiance to the truth, ensured that Simmons's case would not be disregarded nor lost in the annals of history. The wheels of justice may turn slowly, but they do turn. And sometimes it just takes the smallest voice, the slightest hint of doubt, to set them in motion. A tormented victim's sister dubious of the evidence, a prosecutor doubting the case he himself built, and attorneys refusing to let the forgotten remain lost in oblivion. Remember this: even a quiet whisper can echo powerfully through the corridors of justice. In 2023, the scales of justice tipped heavily towards the side of Glynn Simmons. A year that sparked a life-altering revolution for Simmons. It was a time of relentless struggle and unyielding belief, the fuel behind the mission to prove his innocence. His supporters and Mildfelt, the prosecuting attorney who once advocated for his death sentence, were instrumental in this pursuit of truth. The path to liberation was filled with bends and turns, brimming with disappointment and resilience, ultimately leading to a relentless quest for truth. The cornerstone of Simmons's freedom was not a sudden epiphany, but rather an exhaustive and methodical reevaluation of the earlier indicting evidence. In 1997, when previously hidden police reports were discovered, a revelation threatened to shake the foundations of the case. Belinda Brown, the surviving victim, had actually identified several other men during the initial lineups. One of the others identified was Delbert Patterson. Delbert's brother, Leonard Patterson, was the one who confessed to the murder near Oklahoma City. As mentioned previously, the Pattersons also attended the party at the house of Simmons's aunt on January 19, 1974. This newly discovered evidence became the ammo for Simmons's legal advocates, Joseph Norwood and John Coyle, who pushed for a new trial. The case was subjected to a level of scrutiny and dissection that had been previously absent in 1974. Eyewitness misidentification, a common contributor to wrongful convictions, was the flawed evidence that cemented Simmons's fate. As the case was dusted off and reopened, the solitary testimony of Brown was critically examined. The passing of nearly 5 decades revealed that her identification of Simmons as the gunman was no longer as foolproof as it had initially been perceived. This finding was a game-changer, casting a profound doubt over a conviction that had held Simmons in its iron grip for almost 50 years. Incredibly, in 2023, Oklahoma's District Attorney Vicky Behenna, former head of the Oklahoma Innocence Project, agreed that Simmons deserved a new trial. Citing the suppressed evidence, Judge Amy Palumbo finally vacated Simmons' conviction in July 2023. After 48 years behind bars, 70-year-old Simmons walked out of prison a free man. District Attorney Behenna, deciding not to retry Simmons, dismissed all the charges in September. The aftermath of Simmons's exoneration was a cauldron of emotions, relief, jubilation, and a deeply ingrained sense of justice finally being served. Mildfelt, the prosecutor, once certain of Simmons's guilt, had been a player in this terrible injustice, and now he had played a role in rectifying it. Good for you, Mildfelt. Simmons, who had watched with patient anticipation for this moment for nearly half a century, reacted with a serene, composed joy. His faith in the justice system, although challenged, had never faltered. Now, he stood vindicated, his name cleared and the bonds of his past finally broken. Glynn Simmons, now recorded as the longest-serving exonerated prisoner in U.S. history, embodied a powerful sentiment: justice delayed is justice denied. Glynn Simmons was finally a free man. Freedom for Glynn Simmons sheds light on the glaring shortcomings of our justice system. Simmons's tale brings a chilling fact into stark relief: the unreliability of eyewitness testimony. Though often accepted as a reliable form of evidence, its role in wrongful convictions like Simmons paints a different, more troubling picture. The National Registry of Exonerations, a project founded in 2012 to collate detailed information about known exonerations in the United States, shows that inaccuracies in eyewitness accounts are alarmingly high. As of October 2023, mistaken identification has contributed to 920 wrongful convictions since 1989. This study underlines the importance for questioning and challenging the bad decision-making in the criminal justice system. The ripple effect of Simmons' case serves as both a beacon of hope for the wrongfully convicted and a call to action for the rest of us. Help us spread Glynn's story. Bring attention to these urgent issues by liking this video, sharing it widely, and subscribing to our channel. Also, feel free to share your thoughts about the criminal justice system by leaving a comment in the comments section. If you know of a wrongful conviction case you want us to cover, mention it in the comments section. We will monitor the conversation closely. And if you want to hear the story of a woman who was wrongfully convicted of a murder that a police officer committed, click the card on this video now.